The Socio-Economic Rights and Accountability Project, SERAP, has petitioned the United Nations over the detention of the leader of the Islamic Movement of Nigeria, Ibrahim El-Zakzaky, his wife, and former National Security Advisor, Sambo Dasuki.
Yeah, SERAP is accusing the federal government of persistently and deliberately disobeying court orders. The organization believes this is an affront on the supremacy of the Constitution and the independence of the judiciary. Now, it wants the UN to publicly condemn the disobedience. El-Zakzaky was detained after members of his Shiite sect clashed with soldiers in December 2015. Same month, Dasuki was arrested and detained on accusation of diverting $2 billion in public funds.
Okay, we have in the studio the Executive Director of Socio-Economic Rights and Accountability Project, SERAP, Detokumbo Mumuni. Good morning and thanks for joining us.
Good morning.
Good morning. It's a pleasure being here.
Yeah. All right, of course, we'll get into why you believe it was a last resort for you to actually petition the UN. But what's your reaction? Let me get it very quickly to reading in the papers this morning that El-Zakzaky has been arraigned.
Let me say straight away that what we hope and we intend to see is a society governed by rule of law and due process. You don't, under no justification, would any government be entitled to hold a citizen and dump him somewhere and pretend as if nothing is consequential about the humanity of that citizen. And that is why we said, if you have a case against anybody, take him before the court so that due process will be served. That is simply the position. Because you see, the problem that people who hold power now have is that they would deliberately circumvent the rule of law. When they get out of power, they will now be talking about rule of law to prevail in respect of them. That we should not allow. At every point in time, rule of law
is about the system.
The system. We are not talking about individuals.
All right. In this case, would you say that the sudden turn of events now, with El-Zakzaky being in court, is a response to your letter to the UN?
Let us hope that this will not be another short circuit method of complying with what we are saying. Because we have had, no, you remember that ECOWAS court had made an order that Zaza should not be held since 2015.
Yes.
Even an incarceration for a day unlawfully of anybody is not what the rule of law talks about. And the reason why we continue to make this noise is that it is important that the independence and integrity of the judiciary must be maintained, because that is in support of rule of law. To now pretend that judiciary does not matter in an arrangement where departments of government should be collegiate. The legislature should do its own, serving the general purpose. The legislature and the executive should do its own, serving the general purpose. And judiciary is the middle person among this sphere of government.
The arbiter.
Yes, and that is what is important. My business is not about Dasuki. My business is not about El-Zakzaky. As a matter of fact, when you hear people in Kaduna talking about the way El-Zakzaky had constituted himself more or less law unto himself in the way and manner he carries on in Kaduna, you would want to, but the truth of the matter is that whatever you have against any citizen, if he has violated the law, prosecute him.
But do you think government really understands that this is really not about individuals, that you're trying to set some kind of system in place where the rule of law is, is key, is paramount above other things? But when you hear President Buhari, he said only recently that everyone who has been found culpable will be made to answer for his or her crime, no matter how long it takes.
No, I agree.
What is your reading of that?
No, I agree with that. That is what we want, except that we don't want words that does not tally with actions. It is better and in sync with democratic principle than when you make a pronouncement at the head of government. You must follow it with action, obvious and open to everybody to understand. I am not a politician. I don't want to start making insinuations. And that is what this government is allowing Nigerians to conclude.
Now, beyond the legal process or proceedings of an issue like this, which has to do with meeting up with the benchmarks of the rule of law, are there any other either political or security reasons why the government sometimes can want to go an extra mile to maybe a little, you know, keep somebody beyond where the court says he should be kept?
Yeah, like in the case of El Zakzaky, government has said, look, it is actually to protect...
for his own good.
Yeah, for his own good, for his own safety.
You see, let us be clear as to what we are talking about. You are a government, you took the oath of office to observe and uphold the Constitution. That is so fundamental. Whatever you now do that is negativing such express commitment becomes a matter extra legal and an extra rule of law, which we should not encourage. You see, see what Major Mustafa did during the Abacha's regime. But when we got back to democracy, he was still allowed the benefit of rule of law. And that is what I am concerned about. I'm first of all a lawyer. I'm secondly a human rights advocate. And this principle does not recognize who is involved, but the principle that is involved and the procedure that is involved in all these things.
Of course, you've written the UN Special Rapporteur, saying, has there been any response from the
No, we will soon hear from them. But what we have discovered is that the UN or any of its agency is a powerful body. And I have recognized that most governments in Africa, when they are doing something domestically, and it's not in line with the established principle of their domestic law, when the UN makes public, open comment against such steps, the government in the African continent tends to listen. Because we've been at this thing for so long that court orders must be obeyed. You remember there are a lot of court orders. For example, we obtained 2 judgments. Remember that President Buhari said the judiciary was his problem.
Yes.
And judiciary started behaving to type. And the judiciary gave 2 judgments, for instance. One was given in March 2016 by Hembi Idris of the Federal High Court. One was given in July 2017 by Honorable Judge Adiza Shagari, making certain pronouncement, definite pronouncement. It should not take the government eternity to ensure that these judgments are complied with. We have a lot of judgments, ECOWAS court saying the government must provide the wherewithal to give Nigerian children education. A lot of other small judgments like that. But the point we are making is that... And
the establishment of People's Bank.
Yes. So the point we are making is that no matter how simple or most unimportant the judgment or ruling of a court is, that ruling or judgment must be obeyed. That is the minimal desideratum for any government to operate, especially when the government has said, I will uphold the Constitution.
Okay. Your letter to the UN Special Rapporteur, Diego Garcia, apart from, you said that when they make a public pronouncement or a condemnation of anything the government is doing wrong, the government has a way of. But on the other hand, governments are sovereign entities when it comes to countries. Apart from public condemnation, what else can they do to influence?
Let me take you back a bit. The world has become a global village. Nigeria should not be talking about countries being sovereign nations now. We forgot when we were entering Sierra Leone to assist in peacekeeping. We forgot that principle when we were entering Liberia to engage in peacekeeping. We forgot that principle of internal consideration. So we cannot, in one breath, be saying we are a responsible member of the international community. You know, when the United Nations will talk, it will say Nigeria is a responsible member of the international community in peacekeeping, in upholding peace and security in the African subcontinent. So if we had consistently intervene in other countries on matters of the nature, then it is now too late in the day to be seeing ourselves as island unto ourselves. That is not.
Yeah, but I doubt if anyone would really fault the concept of, you know, countries helping the other when it comes to peacekeeping and, you know, troubleshooting or solving problems. Donald Trump, for example, when he just came on board, he said this whole globalization thing is not working, that he believes more in the sovereignty of nations, that countries should decide what they want for themselves.
So no, let me tell you, if we will take Donald Trump's position as the correct position, then we abandon, let us dismantle the United Nations and see what the world will turn into. You see, the countries have a way of behaving, and what I have found most interesting about nations is that when you do things within your own land, if it is okay, no problem. If it is not okay, and people of the world started running adverse comment against what you have done, you think back and try to play the international good boy.
Yeah, but the question people ask is, look, are these things just symbolic, just mere symbolism? Any pronouncements from the UN? Take, for example, the issue of the declaration by Donald Trump, let me still go back to him, on moving the U.S. embassy from Tel Aviv to Jerusalem. There was that emergency meeting that held in March by the UN Security Council. They didn't come up with anything. There was no definite statement, you know, about that action. And now, presently, you have the crisis in the Gaza, where people have been killed. An emergency meeting has been held. Not much really has come of that. So your letter to the UN, is it more of a symbolic gesture to the UN, hoping that it will still send that symbolic message?
No, apart from the symbolism of the call, I want to say that let us have this, even if you call it symbolic intervention. Let us have it and see how the Nigerian government reacts. You see, the problem that I have is that I don't work for anybody. I work for the interest of Nigerian institutions and Nigerian people. And to now pretend that SERAP is no longer interested in these issues will be playing the dangerous card. All I want is that Nigeria should be governed by rule of law, by due process, by adherence to the Constitution of Nigeria. And that, to me, is institutionalization of processes. And that is very, very important. Once you are not able to build institutions, then we start talking about the body language of the person who is actually in government. And that, to me, is important, but not as important as building institutions that will last almost eternity.
Okay. Now, we're still expecting the official response from the UN as far as this issue is concerned. But El-Zakzaky has been arraigned in court as of yesterday already. So would you say the response that we're still expecting is being overtaken by events?
No. Let me tell you that the position which SERAP took openly influenced the government in now trying to arraign exactly in court. That, to me, I say I don't want it to end there. Let us hope this is a consistent pattern of behavior henceforth, so that whoever is involved will have a system to protect him as an individual and to protect the society in general.
All right, let's move on to some of the other demands that you made of the Buhari administration, or Nigerian government, more or less, you know, to the UN to reveal the amounts recovered.
Yes, that's another of a court of contempt jurisdiction that should be obeyed, no matter who is involved.
The amount recovered, the amount spent from recovered stolen funds, details of projects on which the recovered funds, you know, have been spent, and all of that. How realistic is it to actually expect?
let me ask again.
Because this government has been accused of impunity and lack of transparency.
You see. Let me say, how will it be unrealistic to expect the government to comply with the order of a court of contempt jurisdiction. A government that has said, I will uphold the Constitution. A government that has sworn by the Constitution to say, I will do justice to all manners of people without affection, ill will. So to me, it should follow as a matter of course. But now that it's not happening as a matter of course, we should call the government to order and let the government do the needful.
When it comes to making open the amount, on the papers today, for instance, we have this EFCC has recovered over 500 billion naira since SERAP Magu.
Yeah.
Should this be part of the revelation?
No. The court said all those information should be made available to Nigerians. They should be deposited on a dedicated website, so that Nigerians will be able to see and probably ask further questions. You see, the government, when we went to court on that matter, we were not asking for information for information's sake. You see, when you release certain information to the public, the public is entitled to probe that information and see whether you are indeed sincere, truthful in what you are delivering to Nigerians. And this is a democracy. In a democracy, there can be no opaqueness in government business. Everything must be on the table. That is the essence of transparency and accountability. And you see, what I believe goes very, very important in favor of this Buhari government is the fact that, you see, if somebody had occupied a lot of positions and he had not more or less stolen in any manner, that gives him the moral strength of character to talk. And that is what Nigerians believe this Buhari-led government is about.
Or Buhari as an individual.
As an individual. So when anything will now negative or give a negative impression of this principle, I beg Buhari not to allow that to happen.
But what do you think is playing out? Are there other forces that may be tying President Buhari's hands in this situation?
Let me say.
Because in spite of the Freedom of Information Act,
yes,
which is out there,
let me say, whatever may be tying
his
hands, that cannot be justified under a democratic dispensation.
Okay.
Yes.
All right, we have to leave you here right now. Adetokunbo Mumuni, Executive Director, SERAP. Thank you so much for coming.
It's a pleasure being.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.